Because now what we're doing is we're really starting to zoom out and we're starting to see from multiple perspectives, but to be able to hold them in mind. So this is quite like a simplistic example of this would be, you are no longer caught by an argument because someone's having an issue or two people are having an issue, and rather than taking sides or needing to stand up for yourself, you're so zoomed out of it now that you are seeing how your perspective is playing out, how their perspective is playing out, how everything in the system is playing out to contribute to this, and you're no longer had by stuff as much as before. This is where you don't argue really with people. So we now really start to see that if I am getting triggered by stuff, I'm now going, where is this me? So you're saying something, and before, when I was at an earlier stage, it would be your fault that I feel this way. But now I'm starting to see the shadow element of this. You know, and I coach a lot of these people that have made a lot of money, and they are literally sitting there still as anxious as the person that thinks they've got problems with money. And then I go to one of my clients, my poorer clients, none of them are on the red line, but I'm like, right, here's an example of this person, they've made all this money, and my clients will still be like, but no, I'll be different. I'm like, no, you won't. You're a human being. I hear your programs, and you will not be different as long as you carry on in this current state.
Welcome back to the Awakening Conversations podcast. My name is Kate. I'm here with my co-host Amanda, and today we are joined by Anita Tomecki. Anita is a human behavior expert, speaker, and coach. Anita is certified in NLP, integral semantics theory, enneagram personality typing, and works with people to facilitate the change they are usually not even aware is required to live the life they long for. She has a particular passion for delving into the unconscious human behavior patterns of the mind and the body that often get in the way of us living our full potential, then discovering the self beyond the limitations of the conditioned mind. Anita believes that the greatest relationship of your life is the one with you. Anita, welcome to the Awakening Conversations podcast.
Thank you for having me. It's so good to be here.
Yeah.
It's what I'm particularly looking forward to. As soon as I saw the logo, I was like, I want to be on that podcast.
Yeah, amazing. And I think there's so many places we can go, because I think your background, your passion, what you talk about is definitely up my alley, our human potential, consciousness, and our mind. So let's dive into all of it.
Yes.
What I would love to start with, and for those listening, when we have a guest on, they fill out a form for us and, gives a bit of background info on them and what they talk about. And something that you've written in yours to us was that your view of awakening is that we do this process, we go through multiple awakenings as we go through different stages of our psychological development. And that this process, awakening as we grow and we get to, become more psychologically aware or mature, let's say, can then bring us to this place of beyond thinking and into this observation of ourself from the non-self. Like, that just lights me up. Can you speak to, first and foremost, there's two parts there though, your understanding of our awakenings through our psychological development, and then, the second piece here of us really coming to this different place psychologically of realizing in many ways, it's not just this one version of us or one experience of us, there's this self and this not self. Do you want to start there?
God, I wrote that. That was good. Love this question to dive into straight away. This is obviously through the work on self that's happened and then through studying human behavior. And, these kind of questions I love. Through having conversations with various people along the way, many hundreds of people along the way, it's always very interesting to hear people's versions of their awakening. So people will say, I've had my awakening then, and, there's some conversation happening, but often when people are speaking, they're not actually describing to the other person necessarily what it is. It's just like, I had this awakening. And so for me, I'm always like, what do you mean? What was the awakening for you? And then as I hear their awakening, because of all the study I've done, I'm able to map it on the psychological development of awakening. So throughout our lives, we are going through a process of obviously developing ourselves through our psychology, through our smartness, let's say. So we're born into this world as, in theory, a blank canvas, let's say, obviously past life stuff and all the rest of it. But let's just say, for the sake of this, not to get too complicated, we're born as a pretty blank canvas. And they say that at around 8 to 12 months old, we start to be able to hold things in mind. Now, how accurate any of this really is, and, if people are listening and they've heard something different, then that's, this is where, what I've heard, but I'm always open, because I don't remember that age, to, to things being different. But in theory, this is through the learnings that I've had, that, we're pretty blank canvas. Then around 8 months old, we start to be able to hold things in mind. We start to be able to recognize that there is a mum, for example, and all the rest of it. Before that, it's kind of this oceanic consciousness. So in a way, even if we are bringing stuff in from past lives, it's not being held in mind. It might kind of then start being remembered in some way a bit later on. So anyway, so as we start to develop, we start to then, start to be conditioned. So we start to learn to talk and all the rest of it, and, walk and all of those things. And so we're going through these stages. And then, when we come to these kind of awakenings, more typically, the conversations more, let's say, these days in the last few years, could be around the fact that we are starting to awaken to the fact, that we've got some problems, let's say. So there might be a stage in our life where we start to go, okay, I've now realized that I'm a people pleaser, for example. I've now realized that I've got a bad relationship with food, or a bad relationship with men, or a bad relationship with women, or there was, stuff happening growing up. We start to awaken to, maybe some sort of discomfort within ourselves, and we kind of start to maybe match that to, a story, something that's happening for us. So, we may or may not go and start to do some work around this stuff. So we may go, so an awakening may be that, and then it may be I then go to some sort of therapy or coaching or some sort of course, or I might do some plant medicine, something like that, and then I start to awaken to something kind of a maybe more next level stuff. And what can happen is we can have these things where we're either going through this process chronologically. So it's kind of like, this happens, so now I'm awakening to this. Or we might go and we have some sort of, let's say plant medicine, just as an example, we have an awakening that is way above, and we've missed out a load of stages in the process, and we've just awakened to something quite shockingly. And so the way that I look at this is, if anyone knows the work of Ken Wilber, wants to have a look into any of that work, he's mapped the stages of development, and he's mapped it through 9 stages. So each of those stages, in theory, are us coming into the world and us, going through the process of, it's kind of like those 9 stages are a type of awakening within themselves. So there's 9 stages, and typically most of humanity sit within around the 2nd and 3rd stage out of 9 stages. So it's only really until we start doing some type of work on ourselves that we can start to transcend, say, into that 4th, 5th, and beyond stages. But more typically these days, we will sit more in those earlier stages. And so through this mapping, what I see then happening is, say someone goes and does some plant medicine and has some sort of massive awakening, they could be straight up into those later stages. So they may, on their day-to-day, be at a stable 3rd stage of development, and all of a sudden they've done some plant medicine or something, and they're up in now the 8th or 9th stage of development, let's say. And this is where we can often talk about an integration point that needs to happen, because if we're just going and doing plant medicine after plant medicine after plant medicine, we're not doing the work in the in-between stages to start to understand our mind. Some people can kind of go, but we don't really need to do all of that work. But it's a bit like we've spent all of these years, from, let's say, 8 months old to 7 years old is our key formation of our personality. So we've spent all of these years, becoming conditioned into that. We kind of need to do the work of the understanding of that to unravel that kind of stuff in order for us to transcend into the later stages of development. So that's kind of a way of describing it. So what I would always say is that whenever anyone's talking about an awakening, for me, it's always to understand what they mean by awakening, because it's a word that we use, but everyone's going to attribute their own meaning to that word and their own experience. And they do come at different stages. When I look at those really late stages, so this is the way it's kind of like they're all available to us throughout our days. So there are times in our day where there is nothing running for us. Yeah, there's no thoughts running, there's nothing going on for us, but we're never going to be aware of those unless we start tapping into the potential of this work. So throughout our days, we are constantly shifting between, stages, but we can often miss this because, some of those later stages are where we are literally, not there. It's kind of like the deepest state of sleep. When people might say, oh, I was just when you go, oh, you were staring off into space, something like that, and the person's just kind of gone and there was literally nothing going on in their mind, and then it's like, oh, you've got to come back to reality. It's like that state is potentially a really healthy meditative state, but we just don't get that. And so often, some of this stuff that I talk about through my training, it's called prior awareness. And it's actually the stage that comes before we start piling on all of our feelings, our thinkings, and all the rest of it. And it can be quite hard for people to get their heads around this, like really hard. Like there's only, limited people that really get this when I talk about this. But it's like, and I'll say to people, well, has there ever been a time where you have, for example, been speaking like I am now, and you're just talking? There's no awareness of yourself running because you are so in the moment talking. There is no one there. But people can't get that because how can we get it if we can't sense it? And it's like there is nothing to sense in those moments. So the minute we are really fully present into anything, this is why I say our deepest state of sleep, because we don't remember what was happening at night, yet we were still alive. So there is something going on at those stages that's keeping us alive, where there doesn't need to be an awareness or a personality or anything running. And this is possible for us in the days if we do enough work on ourselves. We don't need to be thinking as much, and we potentially, and I'm not claiming this for myself in any way, to be in any states of this 24/7, but this is the potential, of us. And so to kind of bring it down to a more, because people go, oh, I wouldn't want to not be thinking, I wouldn't want to not have thoughts or whatever, but it's just to, really say to people, it just shows that we don't need to, and we're not actually thinking all of the time, and then to really start looking at, if we don't need that running all of the time, how can we start to lessen it? And in theory, the way we start to lessen it is to understand it. It's not necessarily just to go off and do, hardcore meditations or hardcore, ayahuasca trips or whatever in order to get out of it. Because at some point you're going to come back into it. This is going to be running and you're not going to know what to do with it because you haven't done the integration work. So it's not to say don't meditate. It's not to say don't, but it's like, it's a process that, is best tackled from all angles, because otherwise we go and do all this beautiful work, but then the minute we're back in it, we don't know what to do with it. And then we just want to go off and, reach for those things again that are just going to take us out of it, but then we're going to be in it again. And so the more that we can follow, let's say, those stage processes, we can follow it, that real understanding of selves in order to then start to let go, the more we're going to have a more consistent, peace of mind, quieter life.
And can I ask then, you've mentioned like there's 9 stages. What are those 9 stages? And where you're talking here, where we're having this experience of what sounds like maybe just pure flow of being ourselves in a way that we're not having to think about what we're doing or what we're saying. Where is that in that level of 9 stages of development?
So I'll kind of do a little bit of a brief of it. So we're coming into the world, as I said, as not, there's not really much going on there the first few months of our lives. And then we start to, have this conditioning come online. And the conditioning that comes online is all around us only having a sense of self. It's kind of like a first person perspective that we do take through our lives, most of us anyway. But we're kind of coming in with this, and then we're transcending to the realization that there is something outside of us. So now we're second personing. We're now having an awareness that there's a mum, that there's other people, and we can do this to varying degrees. People pleasers are very good at second personing, for example. People that are more kind of internally, internal authority will be more of that kind of first person stage. And then we start to, transcend up to the third level of consciousness. And that level then is all around starting to want to be recognized in the world. So that's where we start to get a drive for achievement, for goals. It's a very kind of, that we talk about the third stage, it's called the orange stage, as it's kind of like the corporate world. We start to get this real drive to kind of, to achieve and to do things, to be here to do. And then the fourth stage we're now looking at, this is kind of now, since COVID more, we are we're growing more into this stage. So typically they say, I don't know where they're getting the figures, but it's around 25% of humanity, 20 to 30% is in the green stage, whereas those earlier stages are much, higher percentages. So the green stage is the kind of more hippie stage. This is the kind of stuff where we're doing, this kind of, this kind of work more. So this is where we're starting to more get into, self-love. We're starting to be more about community. Yeah, we're starting to be more maybe, into, wanting the things to be right in the world. Yeah, for things, it's kind of the green stage. So we know what green, getting out into nature, all of that kind of stuff. So that is the phase that we are as humanity shifting into more and more now. And we can see that coming into this work. This is kind of the openings up into more of this kind of green stage of development, to start to see that. So science, for example, sits at the stage below. Once we get into the green stage of development, we're starting to question science. We're starting to look at the system and start to question things more. Yeah, to start to hold science lightly. It's useful, but it's not complete. So this is where, this is where it can get like, we can get more into being protesters and thinking that the government, we're anti-government. This can be that kind of stage for some people as well. It's a bit more anti-authority. It can be a little bit aggressive. It can be called the mean green at some stage, at some stage of that process. And so beyond that, we're now getting into very small numbers, that we're talking like, something around less than 10% of humanity have access to the fifth person perspective, fifth and beyond. Because now what we're doing is we're really starting to zoom out, and we're starting to see from multiple perspectives, but to be able to hold them in mind. So this is quite like a simplistic example of this would be you are no longer caught by an argument because someone's having an issue, or two people are having an issue, and rather than taking sides or needing to stand up for yourself, you're so zoomed out of it now that you are seeing how your perspective's playing out, how their perspective's playing out, how everything in the system is playing out to contribute to this, and you're no longer had by stuff as much as before. This is where you don't argue really with people. It's like, I hear your perspective, I have mine, and I hear yours. We're no longer caught in that. And at this stage, we really start to see, this is what is referred to Carl Jung's shadow work. So we now really start to see that if I am getting triggered by stuff, I'm now going, where is this me? Yeah. So you're saying something, and before, when I was at an earlier stage, it would be your fault that I feel this way. But now I'm starting to see the shadow element of this. So where is it me that's getting, how am I triggering myself in the face of what you're saying now? Yeah. So we're starting to see that, polarity exists, but we're now starting to really see really clearly how we used to get caught in it. And not to say we're not triggered by it anymore, but we're now starting to zoom out and kind of go, okay, I can see how this is playing out, how that is me, how they are me, how I am them. Yeah.
And so this,
and then beyond that,
just interrupt for a second. Like when we talk about 5D consciousness and that we're moving into a 5D, this is kind of what you're talking about here, right? Like how we as humans will live, operate, exist when we are living at a 5-dimensional reality. And that the 3D, or the third stage that you mentioned there, is currently where we've been and how we're operating. Fourth is what we're moving through on our way to 5. So as you said, the last 4 years have been a very big time of us being in that fourth, of starting to question, starting to see that the systems don't work, that breakdown, speak up, use our voices. And then as we do our work in that fourth level, we're really coming into that place of actually, well, okay, so step back even more. How is this a reflection of what I hold in myself? And then how do I do the work of healing that shadow? Continue, and I'll maybe come back to that as a question.
No,
but
that.
is that
I really I like that, Kate, because it's like there's so many different things mapped, but they all are talking to the same thing. So as you speak about the 5D, I'm talking to another modality which talks about it as a fifth person. So it's like there's, whether it's the chakras, there's so many different things. So whenever I hear people talking about different things, I'm always trying to map it to the stages, because that's what I've learned. So I think it's really key to say, it's kind of like we're all trying to get to the same thing. There's all these models that have been, devised, in order for us to find some freedom at the end of it, you know, hopefully, eventually. And yes, they all fit in. It's like religion, they're not actually separate, you know, and that's why religion sits at one of those earlier, the second stage of development, because it seems like it's so polar. We've got different religions, but they're all, when you get to the fifth stage, you're seeing the shadow in it. You is me, I is you. We want the same thing, yet we need to fight at a second stage because we haven't developed ourselves psychologically to see that we're fighting over the same thing. Yeah, so it's it's important to see it like that. And then when we get to the sixth stage, which is the turquoise stage, so fifth is teal, so they come in colors and numbers as well. So the turquoise is now your non-dual stage. So non-duality. So the polarities of the fifth stage are now that they've gone. There is no, you know, so there is no right and wrong anymore. There is no good and bad. We've now transcended the shadows and everything just is, in theory. And this, in a sense as well, is the part where we as individuals, some people will get this, others may not as much, but this is where we start to see ourselves, maybe have a sense of ourselves kind of here more than here. We start to, in theory, the later stage we're getting, it's like the less we're thinking. So we're thinking, in theory, more complex in order for it to become less and less and more simple. So turquoise is all about non-dual stage. And then as we get like the next two are just, it's kind of, you probably don't need to go much further than that. All I would say is like the ninth stage. And this is, I always say ninth stage and beyond, because ninth stage in theory is there is just oneness, you know, however anyone wants that for themselves. Everyone you know has got their own interpretation, their own experiences that they had. So when we go oneness or awakening or whatever, it's like, well, what do you mean by that? This is what I love, because it's like drilling into hearing their experiences, and then we go, I've not had that, so I must. And it's like, no, just have your own and be okay with your own. And the way that we describe things, it doesn't mean that we're not having the same experience. It's just now we're putting words to it, which is now diluting it. And now we're kind of, well, that's not what I have, but it may be actually, but it's like beyond description in theory. And so that's kind of your ninth stage is your kind of universal oneness. You know, I am the universe, all of that. The prior awareness part, I would say, is beyond that. It's that it's kind of like death, right? But it's death of the ego. So if the ego dies, the thinking stops. There is nothing to know or nothing to sense or anything to feel anymore. It is literally like you're walking around awake as if you were kind of dying, you know, as if you were even past that. Because I know with a lot of near-death experiences, there's still a sense for quite a while, and people can remember that and they describe their sense of self as they come back into the body. But I always think there must be, you know, however many minutes or hours after that where there just isn't that sense that they would have been able to tap into, but there's enough there for them to still be able to potentially come back into their bodies. I don't know. That's just as I watch it, I go, and then there'll be that piece where there's nothing then. And it's like, that's what's the potential of us and is happening to us throughout our days. We just don't have a grasp of it, because how can we remember something that was nothing, if that makes sense? So this is actually like an example of this that I give, because this was when I was trying to learn all this stuff and going, what does that stage of development look like? And people couldn't describe it to me, because if they were at that, you know, if they were understanding that stage, it was still their own description. It was, if I hadn't actually experienced it, then how could I understand what they were saying? So I started to go, oh, how do I start to sense? And what I would start to do is I would notice things like I'd be walking down the street in Bondi, where I know a lot of people, right? And I'll be walking down the street and there'd be, you know, whatever going on, nothing going on or something going on. And then all of a sudden I would divert my eyes back to a person that I knew. So I must have seen them before I knew I saw them, for me to then go back to seeing them, if that makes sense. So I'm walking down the road. I'm not taking in these thousands, hundreds, tens of people that are walking, you know, all these bits of sensory information. I'm not actually taking them in, but they're all available to me. So they are all in our prior awareness state. We are always in prior awareness, but we are only bringing a tiny percentage, like 1%, back in to our awareness. But it's available to us all the time. So what darts us back to going, oh yeah, there's that person. You'd already seen them, but you didn't need to tell yourself you'd seen them. You'd already seen them. Now all of a sudden you're back going, oh yeah, there's that person. And then I started going, right, so I'd already seen them. So what was going on for me then? Well, I was taking in everything without taking it in. It was all there available to me, but I didn't need to tell myself a story. Imagine trying to tell ourselves a story about every single bit of sensory information that is out there. We would be absolutely just, just not possible for it. Yeah. So then I would start to go, right. So the fact that I've darted back to that one means that they were within my kind of awareness, whatever it is, without me needing to think about all of this. And that for me started to go, okay, there is much more going on for us than we could ever actually know about ourselves, And then there was all the investigation then of going, okay, so we're not actually seeing the world as it is. We're actually just having this light hit in the eyes and then go back here and then start creating images, in the back. So we don't actually see the world as it is. We see it as we form it in our heads, right? In our minds. So then there's this whole process then of going, so what is actually there? And through meditations, then starting to sit there and then just have these particles, these bits of energy, so everything was diluting. And that again is the prior awareness piece. We are forming we're solidifying everything. But it's like, and it's just the fascination of how complex we are beyond our understanding. No one ever taught us any of this stuff at school, and then all of the work that I started to do in learning about how the mind works was really fascinating in itself. And we don't get taught that either. But then all of this work I started to learn, and this is like all the prior work that comes before even knowing how we start to run our own minds and get programmed with the filters of our mind that we go about in our days, our perfectionism, our people pleasing, our disagreeableness, our judgment, and all the rest of it. So I mean there's a lot there, right? So if you want to
yeah, that was amazing. Yeah, I just think that is so fascinating, and I personally have my own journey has been to really understand this experience of my mind. And interesting that you say that, what we see, it's still like light coming into the eyes, excuse me. And, it's doing its thing here in the brain. The brain pulls from previous experiences to then, in some ways, from my understanding, create this image of what we're seeing. I'm reading a book at the moment that literally, I think the chapter last night was about that. And my brain is like having this little like, awakening and meltdown at the same time, because these concepts that we're talking about are they're high level concepts, but it's so, I think, an important conversation to be having for us to truly understand what we are as human beings. So we have a human aspect, but then we're talking about our consciousness here, that the more we can be aware of the fact that we have a consciousness and what it is, changes the experience than we then have as human beings. And as you said, with these, like we said before, like levels of consciousness, levels of personal development from 3 to 5, like the range and the difference in the experience we may have of our human life when we're able to essentially expand our consciousness through those various stages. And, that is very much what our awakening experiences are. I think we, as you said, we're awakening through experiences in our life no matter what. It's then up to us whether we do anything with it. But very much at that third dimensional plane, or that third level of consciousness, is where we're really starting to go, crack open to, I can think differently. And then, as you've described, when we start to work with our awakening, we're moving into those new developmental stages.
Fascinating.
Yeah.
I just wanted to just ask about as well. So what was that book you're reading? What's it called?
It's called Why Woo Woo Works. Not a great title, but it's
Why what? Woo woo?
Why Woo Woo Works.
Yeah, cool.
So it's a doctor.
Alliteration there.
Yeah. He goes into share all the science around, Reiki, that all of the research that has been done proving that a lot of these woo-woo things work. And the start of the book sort of is, talking about that in a couple of different realms. And then he just gets into this conversation about consciousness, and it's just blowing my mind. And I can't begin to repeat it in a way that, is understandable. But I mean, I recommend the book if someone's interested in deepening their awareness of this conversation, because I think the more that we are aware of the fact that we can, change and grow, and this is very much your work that you do, like by developing our awareness of these parts of ourselves. You talk very much about, and as we said in your bio, that you believe that, or the work that you do helps people facilitate the change they're usually not even aware is required to live the life they long for. Talk about that a little bit more. Like, what are you seeing through the work that you're doing? Why are people so blind to what it is that they're required to do to live into their fullness?
It's because we're not taught it. And it's just like everything you said there. It's like, just to me, it blows my mind for whatever reason. I'm not saying this is any way devised. Some people will say that this is a thing to keep us small or whatever it is or it isn't. You know, is it just that we're just a bit silly, right? And we haven't quite got to that because, you know, we're starting to look more into this now. And you know, it's just, you know, as we talk about, you know, what goes on, how our mind creates these, you know, images, and then we create these stories. And to me, it just blows my mind now through learning all of this stuff that we're not taught this, you know, we're not taught how we operate. And I know there's a lot of conspiracy stuff around it, and it might be right, it might not be. It might just genuinely be that we're just a bit, you know, we've just been focusing on a lot of other stuff over however many, you know, centuries or whatever, that it's just not been a thing. Because I don't know, in a way, I see, you know, we're always trying to make improvements. So we've got to the stage where we've been through this whole thing of, you know, making improvements to evolve and to be better. And that maybe there has genuinely been this focus on let's be the best that we can through our conditioned mind. How can we condition this mind to be cleverer, to be smarter, to earn more money, to, you know, to have all these things? Because it's like we're in this big playground. So have we just been more focused on that? And now we're, you know, as always, we're seeing the limitations of that. And now we're wanting to break through to something, to something more, because this is clearly not working. You know, we're seeing enough people with billions and millions and making all this money, you know, trying to tell us that it's not the answer to our problems, you know? And so now it's like, okay, so if that's not the answer, what might be the answer? Maybe it's here. Because what happens is, you know, a lot of the time it's like, I'll see these, you know, and I coach a lot of these people that have made a lot of money, and they are literally sitting there still as anxious as the person that thinks they've got problems with money, you know. And then I go to one of my clients, my poorer clients, none of them are on the breadline, but I'm like, right, here's an example of this person. They've made all this money. And my clients will still be like, but no, I'll be different. I'm like, no, you won't. You're a human being. I hear your programs, and you will not be different as long as you carry on in this current state and in a belief that, you know, you'll be better. And I think most people, and I understand if people are on the breadline and that money would make a difference. But I also, you know, I've spent years in Bondi watching the homeless people get stuff bought for them. You know, I'm not saying they're any happier, but I'm also not saying that they're any more anxious or sadder than people with millions that I know. So it's like, you know, what it is. So so then coming back to that, it's kind of going, so it's seeing that, you know, we need something else now, that, you know, we're moving through to these stages in order to start to see that there's something more needed. And, you know, for me, each time I go in, and I did a lot of work in the corporate space, teaching this stuff in various companies. And I would sit there, and every time, because for me now this has become quite normalized to talk about, but this is me in my own world with my friends and, you know, my clients and the rest of it. And I'd go into this corporate space, and people would just sit there, and of course, mind blown, right? And they're there going, I've never heard this before. And I'm like, I know you haven't, but I just like mind blown that, you know, I'm standing in front of people in their 50s, you know, all the rest of it. And this simple model of how we run our own minds has never been presented to us. And it only was presented to me when I started to study 7 years ago, you know. And it's just, each time I hear someone say that, it's that reminder of, if we were taught this stuff earlier on, if this was a subject in school, I would have been interested in school, right? In something. And it's just like, yeah, it fascinates me that this is the stuff that, you know, we've got no idea about unless we do something about it. So then coming back to your question, it's like, so when people come into coaching, usually, and it's changing a little bit now, but usually they're coming in with a specific problem. So it might be that they don't want to be in their relationship anymore. They want to find love, or they want to, let's say, you know, love themselves more, or they want to, they don't know what they're doing in their life. It kind of, you know, it can seem quite specific. And so when I say that they're not even, you know, they're coming into the work, not even aware of of what's missing for them in theory, is because once we start to tackle whatever it is that they've come in with, after a few sessions, very few sessions, a whole coaching program, they would have never have known that that's what they were going to get out of the process. Because say someone comes in and for example, this is quite a common one, they want to meet someone. So they've been single and they want to meet someone. And what they get from the process is they get to meet themselves. Because what happens is we don't focus on them meeting someone. We focus on them understanding what it is that's making them think that they are not, fulfilled in life without someone else. So what we're doing is we're looking for what it is, and, that they may be lonely. They may be running some sort of regret of where they're not in their life because they haven't got a partner. They haven't had kids by the age that they're at, all of that. So then we start to look at what are the programs that are running them behind that. And that's when we start to do the work. This is the Neuro-Linguistic Programming, the programs of the mind that we start to look at when they're maybe running worst case scenario thinking. They're looking into the future thinking that they're completely fucked. Yeah, they're judging themselves. They are, let's say, again, whether we're looking at people pleasers, whether we're looking at people that are really disagreeable. There's 120 programs that have been mapped through Neuro-Linguistic Programming. And I work with my clients to identify around 10 of their key drivers that have made up their personality based on what's happened to them in childhood. So they, you might get someone who's an optimist and they can't do worst case thinking at all. You may get someone who's a worst case scenario thinker, very little access to best case. So what we do is we work on identifying the end that they're at. So best case ain't better than worst case. If we're too best case, we are, optimistic and doing crazy things, constantly on the search for the next optimistic thing. The minute anything bad happens, they don't know what to do. It's a real, they could get really angry if something's, not going their way. So we're looking to identify these programs, and then we're looking to see where they started. So in theory, someone's grown up and they've had a mum who's a real optimist, and their mum's a bit chaotic and she's really optimistic and she's having parties all the time, all this chaos going on in life. And the child is either looking at that behavior going, I want to be like my mum, or they're going, I don't want to be like my mum. So now they become a worst case scenario thinker based on the chaos that they've seen that their mum's playing out. Or they follow it because that's all that they know to do. And so through this process, we start to identify why we formed these patterns in childhood based on what we've seen. And now we start to work towards becoming more balanced within ourselves. So if we're a people pleaser, we want to start working more towards being more disagreeable. If we're more on the disagreeable side, we want to start to work to becoming more people pleasing so that we become more balanced, so that I can say yes or I can say no. I'm not driven by just saying no, even when I mean yes, because that's all I know I've got to defend. Or I just say yes all the time, even when I mean no, but I can't say the other because of what I've learned growing up. So again, it's about what's the balance point.
Can I ask you how you go about working with someone to start changing on that spectrum to the more towards the other side? What methods do you use?
Yeah, for sure. So awareness is definitely the first key. So let's go people pleasing, because I know there'll be a lot of people pleasers out there. And so it's looking at, okay, awareness. I became a people pleaser because I had a really angry dad, for example. I wanted to stop him from shouting at me. So I just became a big people pleaser, saying yes, 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 doing, being the good girl, doing as I was told. So it's really important, firstly, to identify why and where that started. Once we can see that, we can start to go, okay, is that still serving me like it was when I was 7 years old? Is that still getting me, is it still protecting me from my angry dad? And most of the time people are going to go, no, it's not serving me anymore. It's serving me to a certain extent because people like me, but I'm getting resentful on the inside because I'm saying yes all the time and now I'm tired and I'm sick. So it's kind of saying, okay. And then the question really is then to ask them is, are you really ready to let this go? You are going to maybe not be as liked as much as you are now. People like nice people. When people are a bit disagreeable, are you really ready now to kind of, not have people love you as much as they do for a period, because this is a transitional, but the transitional period is going to be hard for some people close to you. And so if they're ready, then we go, okay. And what we always do is we will always start small. So I don't go out and say to my client, go out and tell your dad to fuck off. We don't need to be doing that because that could be a bit scary. So it's a bit like, okay, where's the situation in your life where you're finding yourself daily saying yes to something that's maybe going to be a bit easier to practice on? Okay, so I'm going to go into work, and there's this girl at work, and she asks me every day to, type something up for her. Okay, can you just try this week to say no to her once? So it's literally like we go small. And for them, that can be quite a big deal, right?
Mm.
And so that's a practice. So then they come back the next week and they've either done it or they haven't done it, but at least they've got a story to tell. And usually they feel good that they've done it. Usually it was uncomfortable to do it. It was a bit of a weird situation or whatever. But at the end of it, they've gone, oh, that's actually really freeing. I freed up a lot of space in my diary, whatever. And within myself, that was a really freeing thing to do. And the most important thing is that it is uncomfortable. Because if we're not uncomfortable in something, we're not changing. Change happens from uncomfortability. As probably most of us know, we'll have an incident in our life that was pretty horrendous, and we've usually got through it and become a stronger person from it. So it's about allowing ourselves to have those moments of uncomfortability. That's how we're going to grow, is to grow through those moments. And I think it's really important as well on the other side of that, because I do have a lot of clients that run the disagreeable part as well. So for them, this was my program, is the disagreement. Yeah. So because of the way that my dad was, both my parents are on the disagreeable side, I learned it. So I learned to defend myself and stand up for myself. And that's, so a lot of the time I would be saying no, when actually I'd walk away and I go, yeah, they were right, or I should have said yes there. But it was just no. It's just so habitual to go no. So for me, a practice was to start saying yes, even if I didn't agree. I mean, no one's asking me to do anything terrible. So to sit there in conversation with someone and just nod, even though in my mind I'm going, I don't agree, just nod. What's the worst that can happen? Great for rapport. It's really not that massive what they're talking about. So again, with clients like that, it's like, can you agree? Can you just, where you might disagree normally, just watch yourself. What am I disagreeing for? What's this in service of? Am I just defending? Am I trying to be the most clever? What's the reason for disagreeing? And just watching that and just go and see how it feels just to nod. Even if on the inside, there's some other shit running, just see it all. And it's pretty, it's pretty big. I used to laugh because I was just be sitting there, I'd walk away and I go, God, I really wanted to just disagree there. But it just becomes funny because there's nothing they've got a perspective. Just agree with their perspective. There's nothing, I don't need to fight everything. But yeah, so they're the two extremes. So I think we can pay a lot of attention to people pleasers these days, but also the other end of it is a problem as well. Can be a problem, right? They're both trauma responses.
Can I ask you, are there certain instances where people will be more disagreeable and then tendency to people please? Like, I feel like I've done both in my life, and just being disagreeable, like unnecessarily, but then also people please as well. So are there certain maybe instances, maybe we learned one way from one parent and one the other way from the other parent, and so there's certain instances where maybe you have both?
For sure. But would you say for you, just out of interest, because this is my own projection, but might it be with certain people?
Probably where I feel like, or on certain maybe issues or topics where it's like, I'd say I'm less of that now, but in the past I was unaware and kind of this disagreeability. But also I still have the people pleasing, and I think one comes from one parent and the other comes from the other parent.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And I think that's the thing. It's, everyone has got their own story, right? And I think that's the beauty of it. It's really, for me, it's great to hear that for you. And for another client, it would be something else. And just to, this is what I always say with this is the expertise in the human behavior stuff that I do isn't in me knowing, it's in inquiring and learning from everyone about their own individual experiences. So absolutely, that makes sense. And I know for me, for sure, it's like the agreeableness and the disagreeableness will definitely, veer more around who I'm with. So if I'm with another disagreeable person, I will match that. Yeah. If I'm with someone who is more on the people pleasing side, then I'll match that as well. And I have a lot of I'll have some of my clients who are quite stronger, masculine, whether it's men or women, masculine types, and they will have this disagreeable thing. So I'll match them. And it's amazing to see how sensitive they get when they're actually matched. And then they might say to me, that was really hard what you said. And I said, I'm just matching you. I'm giving you back.
The mirror.
And it's incredible to see. And then we get to a real breaking point. I've had some really tough clients where we have gone, we've kind of gone for it. And because I know with them, it doesn't work any other way. For them to meet themselves in the face of me, because otherwise they're kind of like the harder types that could see more bullying. They've been out in the world. People are scared of them, so people don't say things. So when they meet me, I ain't scared. I'm here with you. And for them to be able to kind of really see what's going on for them, it is for me to match them in that, for them to get into that vulnerability and sensitivity, because a lot of that hardness and that disagreeableness, there's usually a really sensitive human being on the inside. And that's what that really extreme masculine can be, whether it's in a man or a woman. That those extremities of those masculine are on behalf of not being able to show vulnerability based on maybe being bullied when they were younger, having a really hard parents. And so we talk about this like barbed wire, but a marshmallow on the inside. And so I've definitely had a few of these clients. They've been my hardest clients, but I've never not got through it with them. And it's been like, we've had some real things in order to go, this is how you are out in the world. So the way that I'm talking to you is the way that I heard you just talk about someone else. Like they'll be on the phone to me or whatever, and they'll be like going at someone. I'm going to have to, whatever this is, I'm going to do. And then I'll say something and I'll be like, oh, that sounds a bit like you. And they will just crumble. And it's like, can you see that I'm just a mirror of you? And this is where that shadow bit comes in. But where they're at an earlier stage, they're not ready for that integration. But we get to a point where they start to see I am them. Because I don't talk to my people pleaser clients like that, because I don't need to. So I adapt to who I've got in front of me. And it's not necessarily comfortable, but that's, for me, there's always this thing for me where I want to work with the most difficult minds in the world where possible, because I believe that no one is innately bad, and that because of experiences that we've had, there's stuff going on to make us seem like we're bad. And we do things that have probably been quite destructive. I've, got many people that have done some quite destructive things in their time, but I don't judge them for it. I want to work with them to understand them, to see the beauty in them and what's led them to that. There's always a story behind it. So that's like such a big part of the work that I do, is I want to get into the minds of the most messed up people, because they're going to have a story the same as any of us of not being worthy, of maybe being bullied. They'll have some sort of story of unworthiness, of trying to prove something in the world, and they've gone about it in a really messed up way, but they're just screaming to be seen or heard. So to be able to help them with that, but to do it in a healthier way, it's just spitting back out healthier human beings out into the world. So yeah.
We hope you're enjoying today's episode of the Awakening Conversations podcast. And if you are, we'd love for you to hit subscribe. This helps us enormously to grow our channel and to get these conversations in front of more and more people. We really appreciate you being here and tuning in. So let's now return to today's episode.
From what you're saying and from my own experience, is a lot of times we're unconscious to what feels normal to us, what might look at like dysfunctional to others looking at us, just what we don't know anything different. And only through those mirrors can we begin to see that maybe there's a certain another way we can do things. And it's that awareness piece. I know for myself that once I become aware of something, I'm able to catch and choose something differently. I'm able to catch myself when that pattern arises again. And that's where the shift really can happen, is when we can catch ourselves and then realize that we don't have to live out that unconscious pattern, which was just our default. We can take a different step and then start to rewrite the patterning that's been basically on autopilot for all of our lives, right?
Yeah, so true. Yeah. And this is what this work is, just as you said, that it's the awareness and then it's a practice. So as soon as we see it, and often it can be, at the start, we don't see it till afterwards, but at least we've seen it. We may not see it till the next day, but a few weeks ago, we may never have seen it. So I think that's the beauty of it. It's like, people will come into coach, they'll come back in and they'll be like, oh, I didn't do that practice, I didn't manage to do it. And I was like, but did you see you didn't do it? And they were like, yeah. And I'm like, well, there's progress. So the next time you might do something, or you might not, but at least the awareness piece is there, and then the practice can come in to start to change. So, I always say it's like these tools are amazing, they work for a lot of people, but not everything works for everyone. So it's about finding what works for that person. The tools are great. If we go out and use them, we do. And if we don't, then just see what reason we're not doing it. And, if we're not ready to change and we don't want that right now, and it's serving us more to keep in our, say, people pleasing ways, then carry on until
it's uncomfortable
really
enough.
Yeah.
Right. Where it's like, I can't continue on, and we're ready to be a little uncomfortable in order to have a different experience.
Yeah, exactly. So
Yeah, it's amazing, really, that the avenue that you've gone down with the modalities that you use is, to me, just sounds like a tool that is available for us to further our awakenings, to even start an awakening. If we can begin to even witness that, exactly as you've given these great examples of people pleasing and being disagreeable, that through this greater awareness, learning how to work with that, like, we free ourselves to be a version of ourselves that's trapped inside this conditioned and programmed way of being. And that is the awakening. That is awakening, and the freeing of our true selves to be safe in that expression, and to, as you say, through the practice of the neuro NLP, like taking it step by step. It's just that one time you say no, and I can remember, having been a people pleaser, one of the first times using the no, and how good that feels. You don't think it's going to feel that good, right? You are actually terrified to do it and take that stand. But there is something physically, energetically, that you feel when you do, because it's actually more aligned, right? You're saying yes to you. You're saying yes to change. You're saying yes to a different experience. You're saying yes to getting out of that pattern, that habit that doesn't serve you, doesn't feel good over the long term. And, I love the way that you say that, if we start on the people-pleasing side, we've got to kind of go into the disagreeable. And I've said this before, when we really want to make those changes, we've got to do like the pendulum swing. To have been all the way over here, we've kind of got to like swing all the way out here to this end, to then find that happy middle of like, where am I willing to give my time, and where do I really just want to draw that line, and like, what's my sweet spot? And I think it's important for us to, as you said, feel that discomfort of that opposite, because that's where we're making that change. That's where we're stripping off that conditioning and the programming, to be uncomfortable, but also see that there's a power in choosing ourselves in a new way, or showing up for ourselves in a new way through the practice of doing that.
Yeah, absolutely agree. And the amount of people that I have, like, heard say, as you say, it's that swing, and them, say, on the people pleasing side, now being more disagreeable and feeling quite uncomfortable, because they're now going, people are starting to see me in a different light. Feeling great in one sense, but in another sense, there's also this thing of people starting to see me in a different light, and that part as well, being a bit uncomfortable. But it's as you say, because with some people, I really see that once they found their no, there can be some anger for some people. It's now all coming out. And now it's like relationships are really starting to change. And I always say, whenever I see it happening and they might be concerned about it, they're going, oh, and I'm like, this is just this moment now. This is what you're going through with the people closest to you a lot of the time. They're seeing this version of you that they're not used to seeing. But before, it was all just bubbling on the inside anyway. And, there was an energy that wasn't that great in your relationship, regardless. And at some point, a few months down the line, probably can be years, but usually it's months, maybe a year or whatever, there'll be the readjustment where everyone's now going, okay, this is the version of you now that is you now. And now we can just, readjust. And I had this quite a lot when I was doing this work. I started to go quite inward, and I wasn't getting as much, joy from being there for all of my friends and being the one that was, because I had clients now, and I was doing this work where I was more comfortable as well within myself, that I didn't need their problems distracting me from myself. And there was some hard conversations of, you don't care anymore, you don't love me anymore, you don't. And I would just sit there and that's, at that point, it was really important to say to people, what's going on for you right now? Because for me, I still love you. This is about me and what's, changing for me. And there's definitely been periods with quite a few people where it has been uncomfortable, but that's all past now. And we have just, relationships shifted, but we still love it. There's just, they've got, and I've had people sit there and just talk themselves around into a confusion, because it was seemingly about me, But if I still love you and I'm just doing the work on myself and I'm not defending anything, then they'll just kind of talk their way around into maybe their own insecurities about being abandoned or, self-worth stuff that wasn't mine anyway. I can't do enough for anyone to resolve their childhood stuff. So it is an interesting process, and people can get to the point where they're like wanting to push people away, and I don't want to hang around with people anymore, or these people, or like-minded people, and all of this. But when you can transcend that stage, which is important for a while, you don't need to be avoiding people anymore, and you don't need to not have people in your life. They're just there. You may not hang around with them as much, but there is simply just love for them, because now you've found that comfort within yourself. You found that acceptance of yourself as you are now, and you're able to integrate that stuff. You just have more compassion for the people that you used to think you needed to get out of your life. You don't need to hang around with them all the time, but you also don't need to hate them and not want them anywhere near you. That's a massive part of, I would say, that green stage process. We might go through the period of, I'm not hanging around with them, I don't want them in my life, I don't, once we start to transcend that, start to see the shadow aspects in us, then we become more free and more compassionate to others that haven't done the work as much, let's say.
Well, because we're not as attached to our triggers, right? So if we're triggered, it's like, oh, that's just another opportunity to do more work. It's not anything that we take personally. I mean, maybe, initially we might take it something personally, but we realize that, okay, this is an opportunity, and thank you for showing it to me. And it's more part of the process and the work. So it gets easier, right? As you go further along to have maybe conflict, or what used to feel like conflict, right? It has different meaning.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And that thing where when you've got somewhere with it, where you can sit with someone and they're telling you about you, and you can just be with them and not defend it, not because you're a people pleaser, but because you genuinely can see this is their stuff and not mine. And then and you can sit, and even if there's some triggers on the inside as they're saying things, because this is quite normal, I'm not saying that I don't, there will potentially still be stuff that triggers, but the potential is to still sit there with them. And the more that I don't defend, the more that we don't defend in the face of them, the more we can keep asking them what's happening for them, the more they will potentially get to what's going on for them. Because otherwise we're just distracting each other with each other. It's you, it's me, when actually what is it on the inside for me? And that's really when you can sit with someone and just go, what is it? I really want to understand what's happening for you. And you're not in conflict. They may be shouting, they may be angry, but you're sitting there calmly, just, what is it? I really want to understand. And then,
and that's such a great example of how valuable our healing work is for others. When we can get ourselves to a place of truly understanding our own patterns and our own work, and doing that, to then, I guess, really move into that fourth stage where we can hold the argument in a way of like, okay, I can see there's two sides to this, and I can also see that there's, stuff of someone's stuff and my stuff, and I'm just the neutral position. But when we can truly be in conflict with someone like that, as you described with that example, and genuine be like, no, actually, tell me what's going on. Like, we're passing on that healing. Like, we are, we've talked a lot about holding a high vibration and, that frequency. When we do that healing work to hold our experiences and heal, like, this is part of that rising frequency. Literally, we're moving from a third level of consciousness or a third level of development to a fourth one. That's a shift. That's us rising in frequency vibration. So when we are then interacting with others from that more healed place, that greater awareness, that expanded consciousness, we offer them an opportunity as well to heal, to do what they need to do to come to that deeper understanding of themselves, to also make a shift. And that, on a grand scale, when we really commit to the work, is how we really shift that for the collective. And that's, why when we have the awareness that there's something here for me to look at and to work with, if we're willing to, as you said, to truly change, if we're ready, how valuable it is, not only for the experience of our own lives, but for others and beyond, in a way that we will see maybe in our lifetime, hopefully in our lifetime, how we...
Maybe the next one we're in.
Yeah, maybe the next one. But that it's contributing to something so much better for all of us when we can, own our part in things, not project that onto people, let them be in theirs, but hold space for them to see it too, so that we can come into a new way to relate to each other, treat each other, be with each other, and then how that just shifts all of the interactions that we have. So yeah, really powerful work that you are facilitating for people.
And it's really true what you say there. It's that point of, it's like that what comes to mind is it's be the change that you want to see in the world, right? So the more that we be it without trying to change them or tell them how they need to be for us to be okay, which is what we can do. That's also a stage. I need to tell you about this, which is an awakening in itself.
Absolutely.
But sometimes we can hit the window of that because the person doesn't want to be trying to be changed, as much as we're doing our own work and we need you to be a certain way as part of it. But once we can transcend that and we just embody it within ourselves, then there's the potential, as you say, for that to then shine out onto that person. And then, and I've seen this a lot where my relationships with people have changed, not that they've changed because they're not in this work, but our dynamics change. They'll still go off and maybe have their stuff going on, but we're now interacting differently because I'm no longer defending and arguing with you. I'm just asking, what's happening for you, and we're not in conflict. And even if we've had a bit of a difficult, conversation, I don't hate you for it. I'm still here, and I still love you, and I think, that's such a massive thing. And I think that's, when we really look at this, as you say, you talk about the collective, to the point where, and I know this is going to be very triggering for people to hear this, but it's to the point where, world wars, all this stuff that's happening in the world, childhood trauma based, like whoever's dropping those bombs, all of this stuff. And we are so fixated in this early stage, and this is said without judgment because this is where we're at, but we're so fixated in this stage of taking sides, having an opinion, arguing with each other, all of this stuff, because we believe that it's about land, and we believe it's about all of this money because we're so hypnotized into that. We don't realize that, the stuff that's driving all of this is the same. We are the same. The governments are us. We are the governments. The people that are dropping the bombs are. If we're out there having arguments with our partners or with our friends or whatever, that's just the same as what's going on in the world, just on a larger scale. It's us. It just grows from these little arguments, little niggles and the more that we see these things as separate, the more we're going to carry on in this. And this is where, when we start to transcend and we start to see from multiple perspectives, we start to see the shadow aspect. If I'm angered by what's going on in the world, no disrespect to anyone that's angered, I'm not saying that, there's no judgment over that, but all of that is to go, if I'm feeling all of that and I'm really invested in all of this stuff, where is that an element of me that needs some healing? And the more, and I know this sounds fucked, but the more compassion we can have for those messed up people that are causing that, that's how they change, because they are probably very misunderstood human beings that have been through some stuff in their lives similar to some of us, but they're just playing it out in a much, and it's not to say it's excusable, it's right or it's wrong,
no,
but it's us, it's all us, what's going on
it's all
in the world,
perpetuated generational trauma. Sorry.
No, you're totally right.
Yeah.
And this is it. It sounds, because it's like, how can I have compassion for someone who's done something so disgusting, all the rest of it? And I know it seems mad, but that's us carrying on fighting. We're going to have more wars and more. That's all we've been doing, and we've not resolved them. So what do we need to do, like genuinely need to do, to make a difference now, is to do something completely different? And it's huge work, it's and that's why it's kind of like the bombs keep dropping. It's like, wake up. When are we actually going to wake up? Maybe we won't. It's just
and it's like, if you feel disempowered by watching it, it's like, where can you have power? It's like, you can have power over yourself. That's really the only place you have true power, is over yourself. And so turning off what's happening and really choosing to focus within and look at your own patterns and try something different. And because really that's how we change. The macro is, we start with ourselves. So we start within our relationships. Once, as we heal those, then we can make a difference within our families, our communities. And if we had healthy communities all over the world, these larger scale things, those wouldn't be happening either. So really it starts with the mirror, looking in the mirror, looking as people who are triggering us as the mirrors, and eventually we can appreciate them for that, rather than having so much anger and hate. We can appreciate their soul played a role to help us in our own evolution. And so it is hard to hear, I think, for people at times, right? Because there is such devastation happening. But looking at the devastation, eventually you have to get to a point where it's exhausting and it's time to try something new, as you said. So I think that's sometimes the things we need to hear can be, triggering and hard.
And it is true. It's like the more, as you say, the more that we are angered by it, and the more that, whatever the situation is, it's like that anger's coming from somewhere, and it's not about that situation. It's just if we're angry about stuff that's going on today, is to check in and go, have I experienced this before? And it's going to be yes. These feelings aren't new feelings, right? We've been doing these for a long time. So it's like the more that we can get into where's this anger coming from, and I hear some people, when you get to it's like, I'm angry because I actually feel quite helpless that I'm not doing something. And so there's kind of this projection of what's going on out in the world, but inside there's a judgment of self for actually not contributing and doing anything. So it's like the biggest contribution you can do while you're sitting at home over the other side of the world is work on, as you say, it's the work on self. And I tell you what, like this has been quite interesting. When I've there's a few podcasts I've done before, and there was one particular one where it got quite a lot of traction, and it was the first time I'd experienced people kind of trolling, right? They had some quite strong opinions on what I said, and because it's not just my friends, right, who are going to be polite or not say anything if they don't agree with me, right? So it was quite an interesting process of just getting all of these comments, I don't know, calling me a narcissist, calling me like just all of these different things for what I was saying, and just replying to them and going, thanks for your perspective. I'd really like to understand more. Did you watch the podcast? And just like not doing any of the aggressive stuff that and I had people deleting their comments. I had people apologize. I just apology after apology after apology because I wasn't defending anything. And I just sat there because as I was writing, I was like, oh, this is a bit weird for experiencing. This is what, popular, famous people or whatever experience and all of that. And it's going, this is quite, something going on in here. But remember, this isn't about me. This is their stuff in the face of something I've said. They don't know me. And just to be able to respond to them and genuinely be like, tell me more about that. Like you've said something, and then they'll come back apologizing. I'm like, I don't need you to apologize. I want to understand. That realization for themselves that they've come out, something's triggered in what I've said. But the minute I'm now asking them about it, it's turning them inwards. I don't need them to apologize, but it was interesting just to watch how quickly people turn if you don't. I could have gone in and had a big fight, right? I could have gone in and that could have been so different. And it was just seeing just how simple it is
to neutralize
simple conflicts. To just be like, I see your perspective, and to just kind of,
and if we operate in the world like that, where it's like diffuse, more people are doing their work, so where you didn't take it personally, so you're able to just like, I'm just going to be non-judgmental and
witness you,
and I'm not going to throw it back at you like you're wanting a fight. I'm not going to give you the fight, and and then you showed them something, and maybe they'll think twice next time about just putting some random comment. And, so the more people that are doing that, then that's how we change things, right? Like it spreads more, and like, oh, maybe I won't say that next time, or maybe I'll diffuse the situation, right? You're showing another way to be, a template. Right. And like by seeing a template, it's like maybe they only saw the version that's like confrontational and angry and maybe a little hateful. And so it's like, oh, there's another way I can be. I want to be more like that. And right. It ripples out.
And I love, Amanda, when you said diffuse, because you kind of go like that, diffusing bombs, like literally diffusing. Like this is like, and this can sound quite messed up, but I just like, if we could kind of this, because I do this, so with corporates, we'll go in and there's loads of conflict happening. It only takes a few hours for that whole room to change. It only takes a few hours of talking, of communicating, of getting into what's really going on for people in order for that diffusion to happen. It takes some tears, it may take some slight uncomfortability. And the way that I see that, every time I come out of one of those situations, that's going to take work. You're going to have to go and do that day after day, right, to keep that going. I don't say that, my one time in a room is going to change everything forever. But to keep that up, that's then on whoever it is, then the onus on them to keep that up. But just to see, when we sit down and have a communication like that, the possibility for us. And people will go, oh no, you're mad, Anita, for saying this. But it's like, to think of, say, world leaders, to think of getting some important people that are arguing, that haven't actually probably ever sat and communicated with each other what's really going on for you. Like all of this stuff that is so simple in theory, diffuse, understand. You're all coming from the same, we're all coming from some sort of place of care or wanting to be seen or wanting to be heard in the world. We've all got our childhood traumas. To be able to come together and understand that we're all suffering, that's the diffusion. And that's like, it's so potentially simple because I've seen it, I've witnessed it in relationships, I've witnessed it in corporate spaces, just any space at all, is just bring those people together and get them talking. Then they're going, oh, is that what was going on for you? As I was mind reading that behavior meant that, and that means that, but no, you actually meant that, because we can often go, but my intuition said that was going on for them. And then if you actually ask them, your intuition is only serving you on what you've brought in from your past.
Your story.
And now you're bringing it in here. So it's not to say it's always going to be 100% right. You might be right, but unless you actually check in with someone, you're never going to 100% know. So it's useful, but always know that your intuition is still a construct based on your own past experiences. And to really know about someone is to ask them, to check in with them. And it's, to just be able to bring people into a room and just like, let's just talk. Let's see what we can resolve from this, to diffuse.
Yeah. Well, Anita, this has been an amazing conversation. Thank you for everything that you've shared. Do you want to share a little bit about the work that you do, how people can connect with you?
Yeah. So I always say when I come on these chats is anyone that wants to have a chat or anything, just send me a DM. My social media, I'm assuming, will be up here, Instagram, Facebook. Ask me any questions you like, any comments, good, bad. I don't see them as any. Throw them all at me. I want to hear them. So I work with people one-on-one, mostly now online at the moment. And if anyone wants to contact me to find out about that, then just drop me a DM. I work on a program with people over a minimum of 3 months. Some stay for 3 months. Most people stay for, I've had clients for up to 3-4 years. So it's, whatever people want to do, they come in and we do a minimum of 3 months and then we go from there. So that's mainly what, the work that I'm doing at the moment. I'm always available for anyone to drop me a message and we can have a chat.
Amazing. Yeah, we'll have all those details in the show notes on the website and on YouTube. Thank you for the amazing work you're doing, helping people to be their best selves, to help us create this change in the world, person by person.
I love it. And thanks for this amazing platform. Absolutely love it. I've loved this conversation and meeting you both. It's been so nice.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, thank you, Anita, and thank you everyone for listening. We'll join you in the next episode.